Have you ever wondered why you feel things so deeply? Why the pain of others lives in your chest as if it were your own? Why walking into a room can feel like walking into a storm, even if no one says a word? If you are here, it may be because someone once called you an empath, and perhaps you believed it was a gift. But what if I told you that what we call empathy is not always a blessing? That in the eyes of the unconscious, it may be a possession. You see, in the world of Jungian psychology, words like empath carry far more weight than the modern mind understands. When Carl Jung spoke of the psyche, he did not divide it into good and bad. He spoke of archetypes, forces older than memory, older than language, and the empath, if they are real, are not gentle saints floating above the world. They are lightning rods. They are vessels. They are those through whom the collective unconscious pours its unloved shadows. This is not sentimentality. This is not spiritual aesthetics. This is psychic warfare. The empath, in its truest form, is a bearer of pain, not just their own, but pain that has no name, sorrow that drips down through generations, shame, rage, grief that does not belong to them and yet lives in them. And most dangerously of all, they often don't know it, because empathy in the modern age has become sweet, celebrated, and safe. A badge of kindness, a role to be proud of. But when something becomes too popular, it is often stripped of its power. The real empath walks a dangerous path, for they do not just feel what others feel. They carry it, they absorb it. And if they do not learn to separate what is theirs from what is not, they are fated to be destroyed by it. Carl Jung warned us, wherever there is light, the shadow is not far behind. And empathy, for all its beauty, is a light that attracts the shadow like a moth to a flame. So I ask you, are you simply a sensitive person? Or are you a psychic sponge, soaked with the unconscious wounds of the world? And if you are, have you been taught how to wring yourself out? This is not a video about feelings. It too is a descent. We are not here to celebrate the empath. We are here to uncover what lurks beneath them. Welcome to the shadow of sensitivity. Welcome to Carl Jung's forgotten warning. The word empath today is soft, even fashionable. It evokes images of nurturing souls, emotional support, spiritual awareness. But the empath, when seen through the lens of depth, psychology, is something far more raw, far more ancient. Carl Jung never used the word empath as it is used now, but he deeply understood the archetype behind it. This is not about being highly sensitive. This is about being archetypally porous. What does that mean? It means you are a vessel through which psychic energy flows, especially shadow energy. It means you may unknowingly absorb the unlived emotions of others, their rage, their grief, their loneliness, and not just others but generations before them. In the unconscious, nothing is truly past. The empath is not just a person who listens or understands. They are like ancient village healers who fall ill when the land is sick. They take on what others refuse to process. They transmute what the collective disowns. This is not kindness. It is sacrifice, sometimes chosen, sometimes unconscious, always dangerous. You may ask, why is this dangerous? Because the unconscious is not bound by personal logic. It does not differentiate between yours and theirs. It moves like water, and the empath is open to open. Without boundaries, without awareness, this gift becomes a wound. The empath doesn't only feel deeply. They become overwhelmed, sick, exhausted, even lost. In the language of Jung, they are overtaken by an archetype, possessed not by a demon, but by a pattern. And when you are possessed by a pattern, you no longer act with intention. You are acted through. This is the shadow of empathy. A healer who becomes ill, a listener who forgets their own voice, a lover who is addicted to brokenness, and worst of all, the empath who believes that to be good is to suffer endlessly for others. But Jung offers another path. He taught that the goal is not to remain open to everything. The goal is individuation, to become whole, to become centered, and to become strong enough to carry your own shadow so that you stop absorbing everyone else's. So hear this clearly. You are not just empathic. You are being moved by something far deeper. The question is, are you aware of it? Or are you a vessel being filled by every storm you walk into? The empath is not weak, but their power is only as great as their awareness. And without that awareness, they drown. Long before I had the language of archetypes, before I understood the mechanics of the psyche, I had a dream. It has never left me. In this dream, I saw a woman standing on a narrow bridge, suspended over a vast, dark chasm. She had no eyes. Where her eyes should have been, there was only smooth skin, pale, unseeing, trembling. Her arms were stretched out in front of her, not in confidence, but in desperation. She was both reaching for help and warding something off. Beneath the bridge, in the deep blackness of the abyss, there were voices, dozens, hundreds, whispers and cries, longing, despairing, angry, confused. They rose like smoke, like memory, and though the woman could not see them, she felt them, like not each cry that echoed upward, struck her body like a blow. She bled without wounds, she sobbed without memory, she suffered without knowing why. That woman is the empath. Her blindness is not literal. It is symbolic of the empath's inability to see where others end and where they begin. She does not know which pain is hers. She only knows that she is drowning in it. And this is what most modern conversations about empathy miss. They think empathy is about feeling with others. But what happens when you feel with others so completely you lose yourself? That is not empathy. That is a psychic merging. That is fusion without form. Carl Jung warned us that the unconscious is impersonal. It doesn't care who you are. It flows into any open vessel. And if you are not conscious, if you do not know the source of the pain you carry, you become possessed by it. The woman in the dream is bleeding for ghosts. She suffers not from her own life, but from what she has absorbed, from the shadows of others that cling to her skin, from wounds that are not hers, but have made a home in her soul. And there is no salvation in this image unless she turns inward, unless she awakens to her function. You see, this is the core truth of the empathic archetype. You are a bridge between worlds, between the conscious and unconscious, between the personal and the collective. But a bridge must be built with strength, or it collapses under the weight of all who cross it. So if you are like that woman, standing above the abyss, blind, trembling, burdened, ask yourself, where did this pain begin? Do I own it? Or did it enter me when no one else would carry it? To awaken as an empath is to stop bleeding for the world blindly and begin to see. Here is the truth. No one tells the empath. Most people walk this earth, trailing shadows longer than their own bodies. Grief that was never grieved, anger that was never expressed, shame locked away like a secret animal. And these unloved parts of the psyche, they do not die. They search for a home. And the empath, unguarded, untrained, unconscious, becomes that home. Because when someone has never processed their own pain, that pain looks for a vessel. It looks for an empath who is open enough, soft enough to absorb it. You feel someone's pain and think, it's mine. But is it? This is what Carl Jung called shadow projection. When people unconsciously project their unwanted parts onto others and the empath, they don't just receive the projection, they internalize it. They become it. But here's where the danger deepens. The unconscious does not always enter with violence. It does not need to. It often comes disguised as compassion. The empath may feel a powerful urge to help someone, to stay in a relationship that is slowly draining them, to heal the wounded friend, the angry partner, the broken stranger. But what they do not realize is that in feeling for them, they are being possessed by them. The line between self and other becomes porous, thin, invisible. And soon, they are crying tears that were never theirs, raging with emotions that have no origin in their own life, suffocating under burdens they never chose to carry, all because the unloved parts of someone else's soul have found refuge in theirs. This is why Jung warned, the unconscious does not care about your goodness. It is not moral. It is a force, and a force, when ignored, becomes possession. Think about it. How often have you felt exhausted after being with certain people? How often have you left a room feeling inflamed, irritated, depressed without knowing why? That's not just sensitivity. That's energy transfer. That's the psychic field moving through you. But when you're unconscious of this movement, you become the playground for shadows. You carry the rage others repress. You weep for griefs others bury. And the more you do this without awareness, the more your own center begins to fade. You lose your voice. You lose your body. You lose yourself. This is not empathy. This is possession by archetypal energy. This is the shadow at work. So if you are an empath, begin here. Ask not only what do I feel, but who does this feeling belong to? That question could save your life. There is a kind of love the empath knows all too well. It is not sweet. It is not safe. It is consuming. It begins with pain felt in another's body. Then the ache reaches your own chest, and you think it's empathy, but it's not. It's seduction. Not of the flesh, but of the wound. You feel pulled toward people who are broken, who hurt, who carry darkness they refuse to face. And something in you whispers, I can help them. I can save them. They need me. But beneath that whisper is something far older, an archetypal pattern playing itself through your body. Carl Jung called this phenomenon enantiodromia, the reversal into the opposite. The healer becomes the harmed. The light bringer becomes the one consumed by shadow. This happens slowly. You meet someone hurting. You feel their sorrow. You connect with their pain so deeply that it begins to feel like destiny. But the truth is darker. You have mistaken their wound for your calling. Their abandonment becomes your purpose. Their trauma becomes your blueprint for intimacy. And soon, you are no longer helping. You are merging. You are carrying what doesn't belong to you. This is the unconscious seduction of the empath. Not romantic love, but psychic fusion. And the more unconscious you are of this pull, the deeper you fall into it. I have seen empaths fall in love with those who destroy them, not because they are weak, but because they are loyal to pain. They recognize suffering in another and confuse that recognition with fate. But listen carefully. Just because you feel someone's pain does not mean you are meant to heal it. Just because someone's wounds echo your own does not mean you must bleed with them. This is the trap. Empathy turns into a form of identity. I help, therefore I matter. I suffer for you, therefore I am good. But in truth, you are being used not by the person, but by the archetype, by the wounded healer, by the savior, by the martyr. These are ancient roles embedded in the collective unconscious. And when you act them out unconsciously, you are no longer in relationship. You are in possession. So ask yourself, am I helping or am I disappearing? Do I love this person or do I love the feeling of being needed? True empathy does not fuse. It witnesses in love that devours you. Is not love. There is a dream that came to one of my patients. It still haunts me. In the dream, A man stands alone in a massive cathedral. But this is no ordinary cathedral. Its walls are made entirely of mirrors. They stretch up to the ceiling, curve across the arches, line every path. As he walks forward, each footstep echoes, not just as sound, but as voices unfamiliar and settling. He turns to look at his reflection, but what stares back is not himself. In one mirror, a weeping child; in another, a screaming soldier; in another, a dying mother. Face after face, emotion after emotion, all staring, all pleading. He begins to shout, "Which one is me?" But the mirrors do not answer. They only reflect. This, too, is the life of the unconscious empath. You enter a room, and you feel everything: joy that isn't yours, sadness you can't explain, rage that rises from nowhere. You see the faces of others. You feel their wounds, their dreams, their longings, and in time you lose your own. You forget who you were before you began feeling for everyone else. Carl Jung warned that identification with the unconscious, especially the collective unconscious, leads to psychic inflation and disintegration. To merge too deeply with others is not compassion. It is erosion. The empath who doesn't know themselves becomes a hall of mirrors, reflecting everyone else, but never themselves. And this is how it begins. You stop saying "I think." You start saying "they feel." You stop acting from desire. You start reacting from energy. You shapeshift for every room you enter. You adapt until you vanish. And what is left? A body full of other people's emotions, a soul drowning in borrowed sorrow, an identity slowly unraveling. This is the hidden cost of unconscious empathy. You trade your center for connection. You sacrifice yourself to feel safe. But a life lived through mirrors is not a life lived at all. There is only one way out. You must learn to recognize your own face again. Not the one shaped by others' needs, not the one reflected back by approval, praise, or gratitude, but the face that exists in silence, in solitude, in sovereignty. You are not the mirror. You are not the reflection. You are the witness. And the moment you remember that, you step out of the cathedral and into yourself. We rarely talk about this, but we must. There is a shadow, even in empathy. You see, not all acts of kindness are pure. Not every compassionate gesture is rooted in love. Sometimes they are rooted in avoidance. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." So ask yourself, what part of you uses empathy to avoid your own shadow? Have you ever clung to someone's pain because feeling their wound was easier than facing your own? Have you ever offered support, not just out of love, but because it made you feel important and unholy? This is not an accusation. This is an invitation to see. We are strange creatures. We dress our avoidance in virtue. We cloak our fears in service. And the unconscious, ever wise, ever ironic smiles behind the veil. You tell yourself, "I help people because I care," but secretly, you fear what would surface if you were finally alone, in silence with yourself. You say, "I absorb pain because I'm strong," but maybe you've confused carrying others with avoiding your own descent. Jung warned that we all carry within us a shadow, the rejected, unseen, unloved parts of ourselves. And often when we cannot face that shadow, we over-identify with its opposite, the light, the savior, the healer. This is the wounded healer archetype, also known as Chiron. It whispers, "You are good only when you are useful. You are lovable only when you're helping. You are safe only when you are needed." But this belief, this compulsion, is not empathy. It is a survival strategy, and it is rooted in fear. I've worked with patients who became empaths in childhood, not from grace, but from trauma. A daughter who read her father's moods to avoid his rage, a boy who sensed his mother's depression and made it his job to lift her. They became attuned, not out of choice, but out of necessity. And the hyper-attunement followed them into adulthood. They called it empathy. But underneath was a wound that said, if I don't feel for others, I won't be loved. If I don't help, I'll be abandoned. If I stop giving, who will I be? To truly awaken as an empath, you must face this shadow. You must ask, where does my empathy end and my fear begin? Where have I made myself essential just to avoid being alone? Where have I used compassion to stay disconnected from my own pain? This is not judgment. This is the path of integration, because true empathy doesn't avoid the self. It begins with it. If you've come this far, then perhaps something in you is ready to shift, to step beyond the ache of overfeeling and into the strength of conscious compassion. Because here's the truth. True empathy is not sacrifice. It is presence. It is not fusion. It is connection with distinction. And most importantly, it requires boundaries. Carl Jung did not believe in walls. He believed in containers, structures strong enough to hold chaos, forms wise enough to channel fire. As an empath, you are not meant to become everyone you meet. You are meant to witness them without losing yourself. And that requires what many spiritual paths avoid. The art of saying no, of choosing what enters your psychic space, of discerning not just how to care, but when to care and for whom. You may think boundaries are cold, but real boundaries are not walls of stone. They are membranes of soul, porous, yet discerning, open, yet rooted to say, I feel you, but I do not become you. I see your pain, but I will not house it. I care, but I will not bleed for you. This is not detachment. This is warmth with a spine. Because if you do not protect your own center, no one else will. Without boundaries, empathy becomes erosion. Your light becomes dim, your soul fragmented, and slowly, without even noticing, you become invisible to yourself. This happens every day. In marriages, where one partner unconsciously carries the entire emotional weight. In families where the most sensitive child becomes the therapist for broken adults. In friendships where helping masks a quiet fear of being left behind. And if you don't learn to separate what is yours from what is theirs, you will continue this cycle until there is nothing left of you but a reflection of others. But individuation, the journey Jung described as the soul's great task, calls you back to center. It teaches you that the self isn't just a helper, not just a listener, not just a sponge. You are a full being with needs, with voice, with sacred limits. And from that center, real compassion can flow, not as codependence, not as sacrifice, but as strength. Empathy is powerful, but only when it is anchored, only when you know where you end and the world begins. So draw the circle, stand in your center, and let your presence speak without surrendering your soul. There is a dream that echoes through many cultures, a dream of an endless well. In it, the empath stands at the rim, palms pressed to stone, staring into darkness that has no bottom below. Shadows of loved ones writhe, crying out for deliverance, and the empath, moved by an ache deeper than thought, begins to weep, believing each tear will raise those shadows closer to the light. But the well does not fill, it only drinks, and the deeper the empath loves, the deeper the darkness seems to sink. This is compulsive empathy. You think, if I just feel enough, if I just try harder, they will heal. Yet the unconscious has its own timing. Carl Jung warned that not every soul is ready to awaken, and forcing transformation on another can violate the rhythm of their individuation. Still, the compulsive empath clings to the rope, lowers the bucket, bleeds prayers into the abyss. Hours become years. Love becomes exhaustion. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the empath's own life dries up. Friendships fade. Creativity withers. The body grows heavy with ailments that no physician can know. Because the well is bottomless. Why does this happen? 1. Identification with the wounded healer. The archetype of Chiron whispers, your purpose is to hurt, so others may live. Suffering becomes identity. 2. Fear of uselessness. Somewhere in childhood, usefulness equaled survival. To stop helping feels like annihilation. 3. Illusion of control. If you can fix them, the world feels safe. Letting go means accepting chaos and grief. But here is the brutal secret. Not everyone wants to be healed. Some cling to their shadows as armor. Others still sleep within necessary darkness. Your tears cannot rewrite their soul's timeline. So the real question becomes, do you keep feeding the well, or do you step back and honor its depth? Compassion without discernment is consumption. All your life force is the fuel. The well symbol of the collective unconscious will gladly drink it all. How then do you break the spell? First, recognize the difference between invitation and imposition. Offer presence, do not demand change. Second, practice felt separation. Place a hand on your heart and another on your solar plexus. Breathe until you sense the boundary between your pulse and the world's ache. Third, remember Jung's dictum. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Redirect the compulsive urge outward into the courageous inward gaze. Heal the healer. Only when you step away from the rim does the well reveal its teaching. Depth is sacred, but so is surface. You are not here to drown for others. You are here to stand beside them, anchored, awake, sovereign. Let the well be the well. Let the shadows keep their timing. Save your tears for the garden of your own becoming, where they can nourish life rather than loss. So where does all of this lead? After the dreams, the mirrors, the wells. After the wounds, the entanglements, the loss of self. It leads to this individuation. Carl Jung's great message was not about becoming better or more spiritual. It was about becoming whole, not perfect whole. And wholeness begins when the empath stops running from their own center. You must return to it. You must come back to the place within you that is not reactive, not wounded, not defined by another's sorrow. A place that simply is your living core, the self. This is not the self of modern culture, ego, identity, labels. No, this is the capital S, self. Jung spoke of the totality of your psyche, your light, your shadow, your instinct, your soul, not a part of you but all of you. When the empath roots into this self, something powerful happens. They are no longer overwhelmed. They are no longer drained, because they are no longer open to everything. They are anchored in something. They begin to feel with clarity rather than absorption. They see others in pain and do not flinch, but they do not fall in. They witness suffering, but no longer become it. They learn the sacred words, I will not abandon you, but I will not carry you. I will sit with you, but I will not disappear to hold you. I see your pain, and I still remain myself. This is not detachment. It is divine containment. The empath who individuates becomes a vessel, yes, but not an open bowl that spills at the first gust. A chalice, deep, grounded, strong, able to hold without leaking. And from that chalice flows a new kind of empathy, not compulsive, not sacrificial, but clean, radiant, liberating. This is how you reclaim your power, not by hardening your heart, not by closing your soul, but by standing in yourself, feet on the ground, eyes clear, boundaries, sacred love, intact. So if you've seen yourself in these words, in the blind woman on the bridge, the man in the mirror cathedral, the tears at the well, know this, You were never meant to be consumed. You were meant to become. Your sensitivity is not a flaw. It is an ancient function, but it requires consciousness. Without it, you drown. With it, you transform. The empath's path is not to feel everything. It is to feel wisely, and in doing so, to become whole.